We hope you're enjoying BGG at home. Welcome to this Blue-Orange segment. As you may know, we recently released 2 new games, Meeple Land and Cloud City. We also released an expansion for Photosynthesis, our abstract strategy game that came out in 2017. The expansion is called Under the Moonlight. We want to use this channel to teach you how to play these new games, and what better way to do that than by watching Rodney Smith from Watch It Played explain the rules. Let's start with Meeple Land, the board game that invites you to create your own attraction parks to welcome meeples, with beautiful illustrations and interesting tile placement strategies.
Hi, and welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video, we're going to learn the 2 to 4 player game, Meeple Land, designed by Cyril Allard and Frederic Guerard, and published by Blue-Orange Games, who helped sponsor this video. How hard could it be to make an amusement park? I mean, you just fill it with fun rides, food, and lots of exciting attractions, right? Easy. Oh yeah, don't forget bathrooms. You definitely want bathrooms too. Probably some extra entrances. You might need to expand it at some point. You'll also want to put in paths that connect all the... You know what? This might actually be more complicated than it looks. So join me at the table and let's learn how to play. To set up, place this parking lot board in the center of the play area and put this round marker onto the first space of the round track here. Then you'll shuffle these bus cards into a face-down stack nearby, dealing a number of them face up into the parking lot, equal to the number of players plus 1. In this video, we'll set up a 2-player game, so we've dealt 3 buses. Each bus shows a certain number of these colored meeple symbols. Meeples are these wooden people-shaped figures that come with the game, and you'll add as many to each bus as are showing on its related card. So it will look something like this when you're done. All the rest of the meeples and buses you can put into a supply area for use later. Now I've sorted mine into some trays that I have, and if you'd like to get some of your own, you can find links in the description below. To the supply area, also add the coins and a number of these plot extensions and entrance tiles equal to the number of players, so 2 of each. And then you can return any extras back to the box. The tiles with these backs are the various attractions and services, which you'll sort and shuffle into 3 main piles based on their shapes. And then, as I've done here, you'll draw a certain number of them from each pile and put them face up in a row beside them. This will include 5 small tiles, 5 of the medium tiles, and 3 large ones. Now each player collects one of these plot boards, a score sheet, and a park entrance which they'll set beside the space marked with a small path. Everyone should also get a pencil or pen to write with while playing, and the last person who visited an amusement park is declared the first player, or you can just pick randomly and then you give them this first player park tickets token. Now starting with that player and going clockwise around the table, each person takes a certain amount of money from the supply. The first player gets nothing. The second player gets $1, and the third player, if you had 1, would get $2, and the fourth player would get 3. And that's the setup. In Meeple Land, each player will be buying and placing attractions and services in their park as busloads of meeples show up to enjoy their day. Now you'll have to pay attention to the types of attractions they're looking for and make sure that they can get to them, because a poorly built park will cost you points, and the player with the most points at the end will win. The game is made up of 4 rounds, and each round is divided into turns, starting with the person who's holding the park tickets first player token, and then you go around and around the table in clockwise order. But before you start taking turns, at the beginning of each round, players receive a grant. This is a very important step, so be sure not to forget it. You'll check where the round marker is currently located, and then give each player the amount of money shown above it. Here in the first round, this means that everyone takes $15. Now players will take turns, and on your turn, you can either buy a tile, advertise, or pass. So let's start by learning how to buy a tile. Here you purchase any single tile from this face-up area, or you can buy a plot extension or a new entrance. But just be aware, no matter how much money you have, each time you take the buy a tile action, you can only, at most, buy 1 item. And let's start by seeing what happens if you buy a face-up tile. First, pay its cost, which is shown in its bottom right-hand corner, and return that amount to the supply from the money that you have. Then collect the tile and immediately replace it with a new one from the related deck. The tile you took must be placed onto the grid of your park so that it fits perfectly within that grid, but you can rotate it any way you like as long as its entire piece fits on your board. But one of its paths must connect to at least one other path in your park, which at the start is this one. And you connect to it by covering it with one of the paths on your tile. So maybe I'll place this one just like this. This now becomes the entrance path to your park, which you're reminded of here with this stand. Now, anytime you add new tiles after this, like perhaps on a future turn, it must connect to at least one other path in your park. For example, I couldn't add this piece here because none of its paths connect to any of my other previous paths. But I could place it here because now we have a connection. New pieces only have to connect along one path. It's okay if other paths are blocked or just don't go anywhere. But blocked paths will cost you points later on, so keep that in mind. Anytime you add a new type of attraction to your park, you cross out the related box beside it on your score sheet. As we'll see later, the greater variety of different attractions you have, the more points you'll get. Something else we'll learn about later is how to attract visitors to your attractions. The type and color that will come to this particular ride is shown here, so you can at most have 1 yellow and 2 pink on this ride. Now, sometimes the meeple shown will have a service requirement represented by either a gift, toilet, or food symbol. So to attract either of these pink visitors to this ride, we'll need to have a gift service connected to this tile. A service tile, like the ones we see here, will show the type of service it offers on a sign above its stall. If you buy a service tile, it connects to your park in the same way that attractions do. But in order for these to service an attraction, they have to be directly connected to the attraction that needs it. For example, in a situation like this, where I've put it here, although the path does lead to this attraction, it first goes through this other tile, so it's not counted as servicing this one. It can only service this tile. On the other hand, if I place it over on this side instead, now it is both adjacent and has a path going to the tile that needs it, so it is successfully servicing this requirement. And if an attraction shows 2 of the same type of service, having just 1 tile of that type attached will satisfy both. Also, some tiles will provide 2 different services like we see here, one for gifts and one for food. And both of these can be used by any attractions they're connected to. One of the most important things to understand is that once you place a tile in your park, it cannot be moved or rotated later. So you're going to want to try to think ahead about where you want your tiles to be positioned as you're placing them. And although your park area is pretty big, you can make it even bigger by using the buy tile action to instead purchase one of these plot extensions. But each player can only buy one of them during the game, and they cost $6. Just place it on any side of your park so that its grid lines up with the grid of the main park tile, though it can extend beyond the edge of the main park area if you want, so this would be a valid placement. Either way, you can now add attractions and services to this as well, as long as their paths connect. The final type of tile you can buy instead is an extra entrance for $3. Each player can only have one of these, and you then place it on any one side of your main park or extension tile if you have one. You can now buy new tiles and then connect them here if you want instead. But buying a tile or plot extension isn't the only option you have on your turn. You can instead buy an advertisement. Advertisements are just the backs of the small tiles, and the top one of this stack is the ad you have access to. Acquire it by paying the cost here and then take the pictured meeples from the supply, putting the advertisement you just bought on the bottom of its stack. When you gain new meeples, add them to your entrance, or if you have a valid spot for them in your park already, you can just add them directly to it. But we'll discuss how to add meeples to your park in greater detail later. If you can't, or you just don't want to buy a tile or advertise on your turn, you must pass, and then your turn will be skipped for the rest of the round as other players continue taking their turns. However, as soon as you pass, you collect any available bus from the track here, along with the meeples on it. You then place this at the entrance of your park. Each player will do this as they pass, so eventually everyone will have passed and everyone will have a bus. Then it's time to perform the 4 end-of-round steps starting with welcoming visitors, which can be performed by all players simultaneously. Meeples at the entrance can now be placed on any free spaces that match their color. For example, on this attraction, I can have at most 1 yellow and 2 pink visitors. I don't have any yellow visitors, but I do have some pink ones. These spaces require that a gift service be attached, and I do have one right here, so I could put 2 of my pink visitors at the entrance on top of this attraction. If I get a yellow visitor later, I'll be able to put it here. I also see that I can put 2 green visitors on this attraction. The first one doesn't have any requirements. The second one requires a gift service as well. The closest one is here, and although it's connected along the path, it's not directly adjacent, so this service requirement is not being met, so I cannot put another green visitor here. Fountains like this will show a gray meeple, and that's wild, meaning that any visitor can be assigned to one of those spaces. In this case, I'll move one of my green visitors there. Although this is the first time we're really talking about adding visitors into your park, it's important to understand that you can actually do this at any time. So during the buy tiles phase, if you have meeples by your entrance that could move into your park, you can move them in at that time. You don't have to wait until this specific step. And once a meeple is on a particular attraction, you can still pick it up and move it to another valid attraction if you want to. And if you purchased a second entrance, you can always move meeples between the 2 different entrances as you like. Just note the paths that end at the edge of the board are not considered an entrance. Only paths beginning at the entrance piece or this entrance tile can bring in new visitors. You may not be able to add all of your visitors to your park just yet, and that's okay. Instead, you can just place them beside the entrance and then add them later when spots become available. Now, though, it's time for the next step, receiving revenue. Gain $1 for every visitor inside your park, so don't include any that are at the entrances. And then if you have a meeple on a space with this dollar sign, gain an extra $1 for them. So in a case like this, I would earn $1, $2, $3, $4 for the meeples in my park, and then $2 more for the meeples on these 2 spots. Now check to see who has the least amount of money. You then give them the park tickets token, and they will be the first player of the next round. Now in the case of a tie, the tied player closest in clockwise order to the current first player takes the token. Unless one of the tied players was the previous first player, in which case they don't get the token, and the next closest tied player in clockwise order does. Finally, move any remaining busts to the top of the track and draw new ones until the total is once again equal to the number of players plus 1, and then add the required meeples to those buses. Any buses players collected during the previous round can then be returned to the box. In rare cases, there might not be enough meeples to add to a bus or fulfill an advertisement that you've just purchased. In any of those cases, just add as many meeples as you can and ignore the others. Now advance the round marker and ensure that every player gets their new grant for the next round, which in this case would be $10 more. And rounds will continue like this until it's the end of the 4th round, where it's time to use your score sheet to determine everyone's final score. First, check how many different attractions your park has, which, as I mentioned, you can be checking off here on this area of the score sheet as you gain them while playing. And then you'll use this chart to gain the related number of points. Just keep in mind that while fountains count as a type of attraction, service tiles do not. In this case, I gained a total of 9 different attractions, and as it indicates here, that means I gain 10 points. Now for every green and blue visitor inside your park, gain 1 point for each, and then gain 2 points for every pink and yellow visitor in your park. Any meeples you are not able to add to your park that are still at an entrance will cost you points. Lose 1 for every green and blue meeple, and lose 2 for every pink and yellow one. Finally, for every path in your park that is cut off by another tile, you'll lose 2 points. Paths that lead into open areas or off the edge of the board don't cost you any points. And then, the player with the most points has earned the best reputation for their park and wins. In the case of a tie, the tied player with the least total number of points deducted wins. If there's still a tie, the tied player with the most visitors in their park wins, and if there's still a tie, the tied players share the victory. And that's how you play Meeple Land. If you have any questions about anything you saw here, feel free to put them in the comments below, and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. You'll also find forums for discussion, pictures, other videos, and lots more over on the games page at Board Game Geek, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like, subscribing, and clicking that little bell icon so you get notification anytime we post a new video. But until next time, thanks for watching.
Cloud City takes you to a completely different setting with a 3D building theme. Watch our new teaser to get in the spirit. Now let's ask Rodney to explain the rules of this game so you can be all set to play when you get your copy.
Hi there, and welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video we're going to learn the 2 to 4 player game Cloud City, designed by Phil Walker Harding and published by Blue Orange Games, who helped sponsor this video. City Council is planning an ambitious project, skyscrapers so tall they go above the clouds, and you're one of the competing architects to construct this incredible skyline. So join me at the table and let's learn how to play. To set up, first find the 4 starting tiles which show birds in the center. Pick a first player and give them the tile with 1 bird, and then hand out the rest in clockwise numerical order, so the second player would get the one with 2 birds, and so on. We're going to set up a game for 2 players, so we'll return the others to the box. Now find and shuffle the remaining tiles, which will have these backs, into some face-down stacks in the middle of the play area. And then draw 3 and put them in a row beside it like this. You also deal each player 3 tiles, which they'll use as their opening hand. And they can look at these, but should keep them a secret from the other players. You can use the box to organize the rest of the components that you'll need. For example, there are 3 different colors of walkways, and they come in a variety of different sizes. And there's also the different colored buildings. All of these you should keep nearby as a supply for the players to use when needed. For example, each player now looks at their starting tile and its 2 colored squares, and then they take the matching colored buildings from the box and set them on those matching spaces like this. The game also comes with these black colored special request cards, but they're only used in the advanced variant that we'll discuss later in the video, so you can ignore them for now. Otherwise, that's the setup. In Cloud City, players will be developing a model city in front of themselves, trying to create the highest number and longest reaching walkways between their buildings, which will earn you votes from the City Council, who apparently want super high, super scary long walkways up in the clouds. Earn the most votes by the end of the game, and you win. The game is played over 8 rounds, and during a round, each player takes a turn, starting with the first player, and then going clockwise around the table. And on your turn, you'll perform 4 steps, starting with expanding the base of your city. Here, you pick any tile in your hand to place directly by any other tile face up in front of you so that they're sharing a full side, and you can rotate the tile however you like. But once you decide on its placement, it must stay there for the rest of the game. Also, it's important to understand your city can never be bigger than a 3x3 area. Let's say it was a later round and you'd already placed these tiles. That means that when adding this one, for example, you could not put it here or down here, as that would create a city greater than 3x3. The only available positions now would be here, 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 or here. After putting a new tile down, you check the colored buildings that are shown breaking through the clouds and find the matching pieces to set on those spaces. The colors represent the different heights of buildings. Blue is the shortest, green is in the middle, and brown buildings are the tallest. These first 2 steps of your turn, placing a tile and adding buildings, are mandatory. You must always perform them. But the next step of your turn, known as building walkways, is optional. Here you can connect any two buildings of the same color that are not blocked by another building between them by taking a walkway matching their color and then setting it between them like this. The walkways come in various lengths, so just find the one that fits the distance that you're spanning. And each one will be worth a certain number of council votes, or victory points, as shown here printed in their center. The longer the length of the walkway, the more points it'll be worth. Now though, let me set up a few more examples like you might see later in the game to help explain some of the other rules that affect walkways when things get a little more complicated. As I mentioned, taller buildings can block the construction of walkways between shorter buildings. Here I won't ever be able to connect these two green buildings together because of this brown building in the way, and that's a shame because this would have been worth a lot of points. And that's why you have to be careful about how you arrange your tiles. Buildings of the same height also block other buildings of the same height. So in a case like this, you couldn't place a walkway stretching from here to here when there's another building of the same height in between them. Instead, you'd have to break this up into two separate walkways like I've done here. That said, shorter buildings don't block taller ones. So in this case, I could place this green walkway over top of this blue building. However, you can never add a walkway if it passes over an area of your city that doesn't have a cloud tile under it. So a walkway could not go here. Another important rule, and this one is easy to forget, is that you can never have more than two walkways per building. In other words, now that I have two walkways extending from this building, I could not add a third one to it like this. And remember, just because you can build a walkway doesn't mean that you have to right away. You can always come back and add walkways on a later turn. But as you play, you might run out of certain walkway colors or lengths in the supply. And in that case, you will not be able to build that type of walkway anymore. Okay, with that understood, we now come to the fourth and final step of a player's turn, drawing a cloud tile. Here, you choose any one of the three face-up tiles from this row, or you can draw a random face-down one from the stack. If you take one of these ones, just make sure you immediately replace it with a new one. In this way, each player should always end their turn with 3 tiles in hand, and then it's the next player's turn. And turns will continue like this, around and around the table, until everyone has had a total of 8 turns each, which means everyone will then have a 3x3 city model in front of themselves. And then it's time to count the final scores. Here you just add together all of the council vote values showing on the walkways in your city, and the player with the most total points wins. In the case of a tie, the tied player with the most council votes on the blue pieces wins, and if there's still a tie, the tied player with the most votes on green walkways wins, and if there's still a tie, the tied player with the most votes on the brown pieces wins. And if there's still a tie, the tied players share the victory. Now, if you have just 2 or 3 players and you want a slightly longer game with a bigger city, you can instead play until everyone has had a total of 11 turns, forming a 3x4 city. But otherwise, all the other rules remain the same. The game also comes with an upgrade models variant that uses these 10 special request cards, so let's talk about this now. To play this more advanced game, set up everything as usual, but then shuffle these special cards together and place one randomly face up next to the deck of cloud tiles, returning the rest to the box. In addition to the points that you gain from walkways, you'll now also earn or potentially lose points at the end of the game based on the upgrade card that is in play. For example, this one means that if your city includes a route of connected walkways made up of 4 different lengths, you earn 6 extra points. In this example here, we have a brown route that includes a 5, 2, 8, and a 3, so this player would earn the 6 extra points. And if they had a route with 5 different lengths, they'd score 8 instead. In other words, you can only score one or the other of these bonuses, not both, and you can only earn this bonus once, no matter how many different routes you have in your city. If you instead had this upgrade in play, it means you would lose 2 points for every building in your city that had no walkway connected to it. So in this case, I'd lose 6 points. We won't go through each of the different types of bonuses and penalties you'll find, as they're all explained here in the rulebook when you encounter them. But using these will give you something extra to consider as you play. And that's how you play Cloud City. If you have any questions at all about anything you saw here, feel free to put them in the comments below and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. You'll also find forums for discussion, pictures, other videos, and lots more over on the games page at Board Game Geek, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like, subscribing, and clicking that little bell icon so you get notification anytime we post a new video. But until next time, thanks for watching.
Photosynthesis has been a success since its release. It was time for us to offer an expansion, but we had to do it the right way and keep the strong theme flowing beautifully with the mechanic of the game. We did just that with Under the Moonlight, which adds a nice cycle to the original game and beautiful components like these little animal meeples. A lot of additional rules come with this expansion, although you won't have to use them all at once. But let's listen to Rodney's complete explanation, which will give you great insight into the new game.
Hi, and welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video we're going to learn the expansion for Photosynthesis, Under the Moonlight, designed by Hjalmar Hawk and published by Blue Orange Games, who helped sponsor this video. In the original game of Photosynthesis, the passage of the daytime sun caused your trees to grow, earning you points. But daytime is only half the story. Here you'll be playing under the moonlight as well, guiding animals and interacting with precious moonstones. To play, you'll need a copy of Photosynthesis, and we have a video for that game which you'll find linked in the description below. Now, this expansion provides you with 3 new modes of play, and you can play them independent of each other or combine them in any way you like. And here, we'll go through all of them. So join me at the table, and let's get started. First, set up following all the normal rules for photosynthesis, but stop just before players put their 2 small trees into play. Instead, to set up for the moon and forest animal mode, place this double-sided moon piece here on what is known as its starting point with its half side face up and its 2 arrows pointing at the spaces directly beside it. Then on this exact point right here, you add the moon phase tracker. This is also double-sided, but it starts with the half moon side face up, just like the moon itself. These are the forest animal boards, and you shuffle them together, dealing 2 randomly to every player. Each person then picks one of them to keep, putting it by their board, and then you return all of the unchosen and undealt animals back to the box. Every player now takes the piece related to their animal and puts one of these lunar point trackers on the second space of their board. Now starting with the person last in the player order and going counterclockwise around the table, each person adds their animal piece to any empty space of the board that has 3 leaves. And that's how you set up for the moon and animal mode, but there are 2 animals, the beaver and turtle, that have additional setup instructions, so let's go back to the table and see how that works. If you're playing with the beaver, you also take this dam tile. The turtle player collects these 8 baby turtle tokens and shuffles them face down, taking 6 randomly, which they then place face down on these 6 spaces of the board known as the beach. The remaining 2 tokens they then return unseen to the box. I should also point out that the turtle tokens do not block the placement of trees. So that's the setup for just the moon and forest animals mode. The next mode, called the Great Elder Tree, uses this extra large tree piece. And to set it up, the person last in the player order simply puts it on any empty space of the board. So make sure you avoid those baby turtles. And that brings us to the setup for the Moonstones mode, which uses these moonstone pieces. In a 2-player game, like we're setting up here, you use all 3. In a 3-player game, use only 2 of them, and in a 4-player game, you don't use this mode at all unless you're playing with the Great Elder Tree as well, in which case, in a 4-player game, you'd use just 1 moonstone. No matter the player count, the person last in player order adds 1 moonstone to any empty space of the board, and then you continue counterclockwise around the table, adding 1 moonstone at a time until you've placed the required amount. If you're playing with 3 or 4 players, that means there'll be some moonstones left over and those you return to the box. If you're playing with the Elder Tree as we are here, then instead you'll start with the player seated to the right of the last player. They'll put the first moonstone on the board and then you go counterclockwise from there. And that's the setup for these new modules. But again, you can play with just 1 or 2 of them if you prefer. And don't forget that after these additional setup steps, you then go back and add your 2 small trees to the board as normal. The game itself is played following all of the rules from the original photosynthesis, with a few added rules for each module. So next, let's dive into the rules for the Moon and Forest Animals mode. In this mode, anytime the sun moves, you also immediately jump the moon token to the spot where the moon tracker is sitting. And then you move the moon tracker 5 spaces counterclockwise. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces like this. Once the moon token tracker has fully passed the sun, you flip it to the opposite side, and we'll see why this is important in a moment. These tokens, as you can see, always rest between 2 other outer spaces of the board, and they should be rotated so that their arrows are pointing at those spaces. Now, once the sun and the moon ever completely cross paths, you'll flip the moon token to the opposite side from what it's currently showing. And that's why we flip the moon token tracker when it crossed the sun as a reminder that we need to flip this. For example, when the sun next moves, it would go over to here, and the moon would jump to this position. And because it's now fully on the other side of the sun, it flips over, and of course, this token then moves 5 spaces to here. So you might be wondering, what's the moon used for? Well, during the photosynthesis phase, you now collect lunar points in addition to light points. No matter which side the moon is on, it will cast moonlight into the 2 spaces its arrows are pointing to, and then that moonlight will continue in a straight line to the other side of the board. And unlike sunlight, regular trees of any size don't block moonlight. But as we'll learn later, the elder tree is the exception. It does block moonlight. So in this example, moonlight is hitting all of these spaces and up to here, but then it doesn't hit any of these spaces on the other side of the elder tree. Now, normally, the elder tree never moves, but I'm going to temporarily move it to the side for this example, so that now moonlight is hitting these spaces as well. And that's important because anytime an animal is in a moonlit space, it gains 1 point if the token is showing a half moon, and 2 points if it's showing a full moon. You track the lunar points you've collected by moving your token here when your animal is lit up. But at most, you can have 14 points at a time. If you would ever gain more, just ignore any extra. So what are lunar points good for? Well, during the life cycle phase, on your turn, you may first move your animal once, if you want to, or use your animal's abilities by spending lunar points. To move, an animal just goes to any adjacent space in any direction, and it can enter a space with a tree, a seed, or a turtle token, but not a space with another animal, moonstone, or the great elder tree. Whether you moved or not, you can now spend lunar points you have to activate your animal's abilities. The catch is that you can only activate each ability with the same name once per turn. For example, here's the boar, and it has 2 different abilities, digging level 1 and digging level 2. But since they're both called digging, it means you can only do one or the other on a single turn, not both. Here's the hedgehog, on the other hand, and it has 2 different abilities, but each of these have a different name, running and planting. So that means you could do each of these once during the same turn, as long as you pay the related costs. And those costs will be shown right beside the name. Either way, once you've paid for an ability, you then resolve its effect, which is listed beside the ability. So for example, you could spend 1 lunar point to move the hedgehog 1 space, as explained here in the running ability, or pay 3 points in order to plant a seed using this planting ability that will come directly from the player's board and then go into the hedgehog's spot, assuming that spot is empty. There are a total of 8 different animals, and they each do unique things, but keep in mind that any time an animal's ability would break an established rule of the game, the animal's ability takes precedent over the standard rule. Now, we're not going to go over all of the abilities in this video, as you'll only use the ones you need based on the animals that you end up with during the setup. So just check the rules for the details, but let me give you a quick summary of each one, just to give you a sense of the flavor that they add to the game. The hedgehog we already saw. It's good at moving and planting seeds, even ones that you haven't bought yet. The boar can dig up trees, giving you a new way to collect them, and if you spend enough points, you can even plant a seed at the same time. The squirrel is able to move more freely than the other animals, and before or after moving, it can gobble up a single seed to gain light points. The fox is able to scare other animals, moving them, and can scratch the soil to move seeds around, and also steal light points from animals that it's adjacent to. The owl simply has the ability to exchange lunar points it's collected for light points. The badger has the ability to grow seeds into a small tree, and depending on how many lunar points they spend, it will either come from the ones they've already purchased or straight from their board. This ability also doesn't count as an action taken in that space, so this new small tree can still grow or plant a seed during the same turn. The beaver can build this dam as long as it's by a river, and it will cover over some spaces on the board, and if those spaces contain seeds or trees, they'll then grow up one level, no matter which player owned them. And the beaver can relocate this dam later in order to use its effect again. The turtle player can hatch its turtle tokens into baby turtles that they will then put face up beside themselves, and these will have their own effect. And the turtle player can use a single revealed effect per turn, but then it's removed from the game. That's just a quick summary of all the animals, but again, for all the details, check the rules to see how each animal's abilities resolve. For now, though, let's learn about the Great Elder Tree mode. This is the elder tree that was placed on the board during the setup, and it doesn't belong to any player, and unlike other trees, cannot be collected. The great tree casts a shadow on all spaces in a straight line opposite from the sun, and unlike other trees, also casts a shadow in a line on the opposite side of the moon. So in this case, it's casting a shadow on all of the spaces of this line. Any animals and moonstones, which we'll talk about in a moment, that are on spaces shadowed by the great tree do not gain any moonlight. And other trees that it casts its shadow on don't gain any light points. This tree is also a giant obstacle, and that means that seeds cannot be placed on its space and animals can't enter it either. And that leaves us with the Moonstones mode. Get it? Leaves us? Leaves? No? Okay, let's just move on. Moonstones do not belong to any of the players and cannot be moved during the game. They also cast a shadow one space opposite the sun, and that shadow will only block a small tree. That said, if light from the moon hits a moonstone, it's reflected onto every directly adjacent space, and any animal in one of those spaces will get 1 or 2 lunar points based on the side of the moon that is face up. So in this example here, all of these spaces are being affected by moonlight. If a moonstone is adjacent to another moonstone that is receiving moonlight, then the light from the one stone will reflect onto the other, lighting up all of its adjacent spaces as well. So in this example, the moon's hitting this stone, which lights up this stone, and then that stone lights up this stone. So really, all of the spaces directly adjacent to this entire clump of moonstones is considered to be in moonlight. Now here's a couple of extra things to keep in mind. Moonstones, like the Great Elder Tree, are considered obstacles, meaning that seeds and animals can't enter their spaces. And if you place the moonstone or the great tree in the center space during setup, because these never move, they will never be in moonlight. Moonbeams just never hit this space. Also, an obstacle here will block the players from being able to collect any of the 4-leaf scoring tokens, unless a player is using one of the turtle's special abilities, which you can learn about in the rulebook. Otherwise, the game is played as normal, and at the end, in addition to any regular points you would score, you also earn 1 point for every unused lunar point you have. And that's how you play the Under the Moonlight expansion for photosynthesis. If you have any questions about anything you saw here, feel free to put them in the comments below and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. You'll also find forums for discussion, pictures, other videos, and lots more over on the games page at Board Game Geek, which I'll put a link to in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please consider liking, subscribing, and clicking that little bell icon so you get notification anytime we post a new video. But until next time, thanks for watching.
hope you enjoyed this presentation. We look forward to hearing about your experiences playing our new games. Tag us at Blue Orange Games when you post images on social media, or message us if you have any questions. Thank you for watching and have a good rest of your weekend. Bye!